are enjoying our Latina leadership series, El Poder de la Mujer, the power of women. Yes, women are making things happen, especially Latinas. And I have my sunglasses on today because we are interviewing a Latina rock star. Yes, a movie producer. And we're going to hear all about this incredible story about, tell me the title.
The name of my film, it came out in 2016, is called Being Enye. It's
Being Enye with the
Being
Enye.
Enye. Yeah,
Yeah,
the
because the
Enye that
Enye
everybody.
is special to Latinos. We're the only ones that have Enye. So if everybody can say Enye together, it kind of distinguishes us. And it's an award-winning film. And Denise has been all over the country. She is a public speaker. She actually is now the author of a wonderful book that will be out in 2026 called What Will People Say? Or What Will They Say? Right? And
Yes.
it's going to be a liberating guide for Latinas to share our secrets and our dreams, which is so important. And it's going to be published by Simon & Schuster, which is a great publishing company. So congratulations, Denise.
Thank
We
you.
really want to talk about you and all the good things you've done and the accolades that Being Enye has gotten and all the exposure it's given our community. And I know it's crossed over now and you have some new ways of looking at what we're doing that came from all of your travels and talking to people and research. So anyway, but people want to know what inspired you? Where did you come from? What in your family gave you the presence and the power and the ability to do all the things you're doing? And by the way, we did not coordinate our outfits. It
No,
just
we
happened.
did
And
it.
for those of you that are there, purple, this aqua color was the sacred color of the Aztecs. Our Lady of Guadalupe's shawl was aqua or turquoise, I guess we would say turquoise. So yeah, you and I are on the same page.
And I love that. And this is such a power color for me, and which is why I'm wearing it. And it's funny, I actually just posted like, where can I find more clothes in this color? Because it's definitely, I love these glasses. I always feel like myself, I'm in my power when I wear them. And then also this top, I just feel so comfortable in it. So I love that it's
Yeah.
like
And
that.
we look so beautiful in this color. It's a
I
very
mean,
attractive color. I love this color.
yes.
Anyway, yeah, so Latinas are always on the same page.
I
But
love
yeah,
it.
how about growing up and your parents and your kind of my grandson says tell your origin story because they're all into superheroes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I grew up and all of this, everyone can watch my film Being Enya, and you can just look up my name, Denise Tiller Cox, and there's a place for you to put your emails. You can watch the film. It's 37 minutes. So very condensed, I grew up in the suburbs of New York City, and my parents met in church, singing in the choir in Spanish, in a church in Spanish Harlem, and they wanted a better life for us. My mom is from Puerto Rico. My dad grew up in New York City's parents from Puerto Rico and Cuba. And so, in the 70s, it cost a lot of money to move out of the Bronx and into a place where I grew up, which is called Westchester County, Rolling Hills, very Americana, very like not.
How old were you when you moved there?
I was only 4 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
See,
that's.
I was 7 when my parents moved to the Anglo part of town.
Oh,
I mean,
interesting.
so, and the thing I really like about your film and what you're talking about is we've had these experiences, but we're not really sure how it impacted us and what we do with it, And like you say, a lot of times we're kind of embarrassed because we were stripped from our culture. So, but Harlem was a hot kind of a hotbed of Latino culture at the time, and then you go to the suburbs.
Yep. And I was only 4, so I really didn't, my whole world was constantly transitioning from living in the Rolling Hills, beautiful area that I grew up in, and then going back to the Bronx to visit family, going to parties, going to church every Sunday in Spanish Harlem to spend time there. So I was always living in that contrasted life. And then growing up, I also went to Puerto Rico probably 3 or 4 times a year to celebrate all of my family's special occasions. And so I was constantly living the duality. And one of the things that came up for me very early on was first my very fair skin. My cousins would always tease me in Puerto Rico, the term is hincha, and it basically means without color, like
Wow.
devoid of color. And so everybody used to make fun of me for burning because I was the lightest skinned person in my family. And I always got sunburned at the beach because nobody knew about anything about SPF, right? And so, and then when I went back to the States and was going to school and people found out that I was Latina and specifically Puerto Rican, some people weren't very tolerant of that. And so
Right.
I would be teased and kind of as soon as my
Well, let
ethnic
me ask you
identity,
this, because were there Latino kids in your school, or was it?
no,
No.
I was, out of the entire district, I believe there was just us and then maybe a few other families. Right now, I can only think of three of us that were in my high school at the same time. So, and I was definitely, I didn't know of any other Latinos. There's a gentleman named Gustavo, and it's funny, everybody called him Gus. And as a kid, I knew him as Gus. Never did I think to talk to Gus as a Latino to Latino. He didn't come into my life until we were in high school. But as adults, and after he saw my film, because when the film came out, of course, all my childhood friends saw it and they were like, wow, that's so amazing. I didn't know that you felt that way or went through that. Gus was one of the people that reached out and said, how did we never talk about this going to school together? But we just didn't, because sometimes without art, and I'll put film in there, and writing is the same way. Books with, books, film, music, any painting, expressions of art really gives us an avenue to understand truth. And so without it, we don't have language. We don't have an ability to talk about these things. And so,
Right.
and so it was really
Well, I
after.
like to say that when I was growing up, I never saw a Latino in any position of influence, not even a bus driver. And, I mean, not even working in a nice store. So it's really hard for young children as they're growing up to have the aspirations and also just the identity of who I am if you don't see people like yourself. And I think, Latinos are constantly struggling with assimilation, acculturation. Where were we on these continuums? 60% of Latinos say they want to be more Latino now because, we're coming into our own.
Love that. I love that.
Yeah. And we're coming into our power. And now people are proud to be Latino, but it was really difficult as we were growing up.
Yes.
Yeah. It's sort of being invisible. And at the same time, knowing that people don't think you're smart simply because of your culture or your family background.
Right. Yeah. Yes. It's like almost being invisible, being discounted, being othered, but then also being found out and being treated completely different. And like you said, yeah, I mean, to this day, I still get compliments or comments of people being impressed at my education or my accomplishments in a way that does feel a little funny to me,
Right, right. No, no, no. And I try to tell people when they do that, well, there's a lot of us. There's a lot of us
Yeah.
that
The only reason why I made this movie and made all the sacrifices that I did to make the film was to remind our community that they are not alone. It was my 100% intent. There was no other goal but that. I thought I would think after 8 years, maybe some ground would have been covered, right? And I know that there's so many of us now reaching new heights, getting bigger degrees, getting better jobs, ascending, starting businesses and all that stuff. And what I see, Juana, is so much pain still. So much pain about the same stuff, so much imposter syndrome, so much grappling. And one thing that I discovered is we must prioritize these conversations that we're having now and really speaking honestly about our real struggles and pretending, polishing things up so they look fancy and kind of showing up and not discussing like the mess, the perceived brokenness and all of these things that I really prioritize in my public life. I really try to show as much of my own humanity as I possibly can because I understand how important it is to younger me to see someone being real. And I see you as someone like that too. Whether you know it or not, Juana, you really come across as someone who is super, super authentically yourself. And in that authenticity, you lead, and you lead us other women into feeling like, okay, I could lead authentically, be with who I am.
I do think it does take, like you say, talking. Now, here's a really important thing that I want to stress. You can't do this alone.
No.
Because what people say about the psychology of oppression, which is what we're talking about, how what people that are marginalized don't feel well, we can't because we're not in charge. We didn't build the system. It's not our language, etc. You know, but how we really have to work through this and do it in a way that heals us. And I say the next step is to recognize that because of what we've overcome, because of our strengths, because of being bilingual and bicultural, because of growing up, like I say in my book, you know, I thought I was poor. No, I was scrappy. I was smart. I was ingenious. I made it. And we all did that. And so once you get through the pain, I think you can acknowledge, and that's life's gift to us. You can acknowledge the strength, the understanding, the compassion that comes from having these kinds of experiences as children. And then the other thing is that, yes, we do know the dominant culture. You
Yeah.
know what I'm talking about?
Oh,
I was
yeah.
also going to say congratulations on your book because, you know, when I was growing up, first of all, Latinos weren't even put on the census till 1980, right? So we're still in the identity formation stage. We're still,
Mhm.
and because of our diversity, because of our youth, because of so many factors, you know, we need to do that. We need to strengthen our identity, know who we are so we can move forward. So anyway, but you know, what I was so fascinated by your movie is that it wasn't just my generation. We're talking first gen, we're talking younger Latinos who are still getting these messages, even though we're 51% of the growth in the country and, you know, we do all the work.
Yeah, I mean, and like, yeah, these things get passed down generation to generation. And what's interesting about addressing like Generation Enya, right? The first gen is that there are millions. At the time that I made the film, there were 16 million first gens out there, you know, supposedly, right? That measured people that were willing to, you know, do the census and
Right.
report that accurately. And the number continues to grow because, you know, there could be a 5-year-old first gen and there could be a
Right.
50-year-old. And the reason why I'm so fascinated with that specific experience is because it's like the fulcrum, you know what I mean? It's like depending on how that generation does, it so falls the rest of the people. So to the extent to which I can heal my own generational trauma, completely affects my own daughter's well-being and an ability to experience agency and power in their own lives and be successful Latinas with the ability to embrace their Latinidad and also have the life that they want to have. Now, if I still struggle and challenge, which, you know, hello, we all are, right? We're always all a work in progress. But my commitment is that I work these things out so that they don't get handed down, and I only hand down what I've learned to them, right? I only hand down what I want to gift to them of what I learned in my own personal journey of my own identity
Yeah.
challenges, you know?
Yeah. And you know, and I also want, because I was so touched by some of the work you're doing now with this new concept that you have about inclusion and about belonging and radical cultural awareness. Talk to us because I think the movie brought you to a new level.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? All of a sudden, not only were people saying we agree with this, but you were able to see how it had kind of a universal impact on people.
Yeah. And that's like, it's funny, you know, so like I said, the idea came in 1996 at the bar. It took me 17 years though to
Wait,
feel
how many?
17 years.
Okay,
And
everybody, hold on to your dreams because
yeah, I
sometimes
mean,
sometimes the seed is planted and you
yeah.
have to nurture that and let it germinate.
Yep. And I just got the chills when you said that because I call that stage my becoming. Because when I had the idea for the film, I had just an engagement, which I'm very happy about, but an engagement had just broken up. I just moved in because I had to into a very small 400 square foot apartment with like cockroaches coming out of my sink. I lost my job because I got laid off. I was working at a magazine and it folded, and I had inherited the truck that my parents used to drive me to Boston University every year. It was like this old beater stick shift truck because my ex-fiance got the nice car in the breakup. So I had to learn how to drive stick. And then I have this idea come to me that I'm going to heal a generation of people one day by making a film. And the
Wait a
kicker
minute.
is,
Here it comes. I'm going to heal a generation of people and I'm going to use a film to do that. That's such a beautiful purpose.
Thank you.
And I want to have people really tune into their intuition and to listen when you get a message like that. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's so important. I I lost my job, and so I was actually working out of the second floor of a print shop in Hialeah, Florida, which at that time was a very, we'll say, gritty area to work. My life looked the exact opposite of what it looks like now. It looked the exact opposite of like the perfect time to have a life-changing idea. I needed to like honor and respect the idea and become the woman that I needed to become and give myself the grace to become her. And in my case, I was so far away from that that it took 17 years for me to one morning just say, all right, I'm going to do it. And 2 years after that, the film came out. Um, it was a very long journey. Now, here's the second
Oh, wait a
interesting.
minute. I want to ask you something. Because who was the co-producer? Because I was really impressed that you went and got somebody. How did you do that? I think that's a good lesson for people. You have
Yeah.
this idea about a film, you've got to get support. How'd you do it?
Well, so I always call this part magic because this is the part that is, I would say it's in our control, but it's also not in our control because I think that we're given ideas because we're supposed to do something about them. And
Right.
so I believe once we begin to take action, that the exact right people come into our lives to help us because it becomes part of their journey as well. And
Okay, so
so
Latinos call this destino. We
Destino,
call
yeah.
it destino. Latinos believe you have a destino. I'll give you a quick example from my life. I'm the youngest child of youngest daughter of an eight people family, 8 children. And because I was, that's why I could get educated and have all the privileges that I do. The rest of my family didn't have the opportunities I had just from what position I was in the family.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. There you
That's
go.
destino. Destino puts you in certain places, and gave you the experiences that you needed in order to catapult into this film.
Yeah, and so here's something that's interesting, Juana. We have this in common. I'm the youngest grandchild of a family with 8 kids. So
Wow.
my mother is in your position,
Yes.
the
Yes.
last daughter, the last child of 8, and I'm her last daughter. And so I have countless, my second cousins are closer in my age than my first cousins. My first cousins are more like Diaz. So and so that's an interesting way of looking at it. But
Yeah,
no,
no, I mean, because I really want people to think about it. I'll give you another example. When I was born, women couldn't do what they're doing today. I've been part of the feminist movement since the 80s, and look at the incredible change in women's roles. Well, I was born at a certain time with certain abilities and certain qualities that I could uplift women's leadership. And I wasn't afraid to do it because I could see how my mother, as a humble immigrant, did everything she did to get me to where I was. And so again, we tap into that well that at one point we were embarrassed about. Now I think my mother's the greatest servant leader I ever met. And yet
oh,
when I was growing up, I was embarrassed. She had an accent, fifth grade education, her teeth weren't right, et cetera, et cetera. And now I'm looking at, oh my God, OMG, or I like to say, ay Dios mío. So go ahead, because
no, no.
it is so important to have that sense of destiny or that sense of the intuition or that sense of purpose. Why am I here?
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, I was just so the how I met my producing and directorial partner in the film was actually through his next door neighbor, who I met at a mom event here in Denver. And then I bumped into her in the produce section of a supermarket. And so we're always in the exact place we need to be, whether we know it or not. We are always in the exact right spot. So in the produce section, there she was picking out grapes, there I was grabbing cilantro, and we decide to do a play date and with our kids who were very young at the time. And while I was having, we were doing this play date together, I shared this idea that I had for a film because during the 17 years, this was the one thing I always said that I wanted to do. This is the one thing that kind of drove my sense of purpose, that one day I would make this film. And so it came out while we
I
were
love
talking.
this.
And yeah, I came out while we were talking and she's like, you should meet my next door neighbor. He makes movies. And I'm like, that's great. That was July. And I never called her again because it got, in hindsight, I realized that terrified me. Wow. Like this could actually happen. And I was more at that time used to talking about what I wanted to do and not doing anything about it.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay, hold on, those who are listening, talking but no action.
yep. And that has its own gravitational pull. Inaction
Exactly.
has
Yeah.
its own, right? And so we really do need to get moving. And so July, 5 more months to the year, and it was January 1st that I decided to actually do something about it. I gave myself a year to make significant progress. I don't even know where I got that from, but I just decided I'm going to make significant progress on this or I'll stop talking about it because I'm so tired of talking about it. And so I called her the very next work day I could, and I said, "Could I have your next door neighbor's phone number?" And she gave it to me, and
And
that's
who was it? It's somebody who really had some experience.
well, yes, he's actually a local Oscar nominated producer of documentaries, and
Mhm.
his name is Henry Ansbacher. And so I pitched him in his office, and I pitched my heart out, and I was very lucky.
I actually know him.
Oh, no kidding. Oh my gosh.
His stepmother is Swanee Hunt.
Yes, correct,
Oh,
correct.
well, here we go. Latinos connected all over the
There you
world.
go. There you go.
Know what
So
I was going to say
yeah,
especially for the folks that are listening. So listen to your intuition. When your intuition says you're going to make a movie or you're going to get a degree or you need a new job or, hey, that partner is not for you, listen, because your intuition is coming from there. The other thing is have that sense of destino or purpose. We all are totally unique. I like to say we're a one of a kind design. And then the second part of that is a unique feature of the divine because there's
oh,
never be another person like us. Forget about it. You fill a
right.
certain spot in the universe. And then the third one is when you say yes, which is what you did, opportunity, the door opens because the universe is not going to let you be out there on a limb. If you say, yes, I'll do this, the door opens and here is someone who can help you with the film.
Yeah.
And so for those of you that are listening, think about times in your life when opportunity knocked, your coach that told you could go to high school or invited you to play on one of the teams, someone who said, boy, you're really good at design and colors. Have you thought about being an artist? Think about these things in your life that opened up because that's how you know you're on your path and your journey by looking back. But I want to congratulate you for listening because hairy big goals. Well, I'm going to
Oh
make a
yeah.
movie. It's
Yeah.
like when I was going to write a book. You just got to do it, folks. You just got to
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah, and the thing is that there's so much, speaking of gravitational pull, it won't make sense. Like, don't wait for it to make sense because it won't. And one of the other things I told you, the number one question I get is about imposter syndrome. A comment that I got for years after the film came out. I can't tell you how many people came up to me after they saw the film and said, I had the exact same idea, but I never did anything about it.
Oh,
And I
wow.
was like, why not? And they said, well, I didn't have the money you have. I didn't have a film
You
degree.
didn't
Like,
have any money.
right. And that's what it's funny what people made up in their minds. I didn't have the money you had. I don't have a film degree like you do. I never had a film degree. I don't have the relationships that you do. All my relationships came in the magic, right? In the destino category. I didn't have what you have. And that, and the thing is, I'm human too. We're all human. We all do this and we discount these dreams, these realities that are kind of wanting to be birthed, right? We're given the idea, like on that book, Big Magic. I always talk about it because it's such a powerful testament to this idea that we are really all given ideas. And I believe we're given those ideas to forward humanity in some way, shape, or form, like our contribution to the world. And the thing is that they're sprinkled in a few hearts, not just ours. And I saw that in Technicolor with this film. And then now I'm writing a book, and guess what? I'm seeing it again. Oh, I had that idea. I just haven't, I never wrote it. You're so lucky. And I'm like, wow, when they say,
No, it took me 7 years to write my first book. I don't even know where it came from. I think you just have to have that sense of dedication. When you look at great leaders, they're dedicated to a mission or a cause or a purpose, or they want to do something with their lives. And then what you're going to do follows that sense of, I want to contribute. I want to, and part of it is, I want to expand, learn, and grow my gifts.
yeah, yeah. And honestly, like by answering the call, we get to. That's like the get to part. We get to expand our gifts. We get to learn. And for me, I was so driven to make this film, and I just didn't believe it was going to happen so fast. You know, relatively quickly it happened after I made the decision. And I didn't have what will I do after the film came out planned, because I just thought it would take me forever. I thought it would take me the rest of my life. And so everything that happened after it came out, I consider like a gift, and it challenged me. And I began to become an expert in belonging, which is the farthest from where I thought I would land. But I realized I made a film very specifically about the first gen experience here, right? And that navigating those two different worlds, the pain and just getting, you know, just identifying and touching upon the real feelings that are connected with that first gen experience. And what came back was everybody from all over the world who felt the same, regardless of nationality, regardless of ethnicity. And in that time, it's like I grew, I expanded, and I realized, wow, there's more here for me to share, because all of the learnings now that I teach have come to me like gifts, and they've come through people. But you know this too, Juana, from being out in the world and speaking, and the incredible conversations that happen after you get off the stage. You know, people begin to, for me, they pretty much are always saying the same thing with different faces, right? And so my book is really inspired by those conversations, because I realized, wow, am I meant was the movie really meant to be the doorway so I could meet all these people, so that I could then take that information that I learned and then write this book and set Latinas free, which is now my new crusade.
Oh, I love that. A liberation guide for Latinas to share their secrets and their dreams.
To
You
shed,
know,
to shed their
I
secrets.
do want to, before we move into the book and leave the movie,
Yeah.
give people a little synopsis of what they'll see when they see the movie, because that's so important, and how they can share it with others, because we're talking about the first gen experience. What did you learn about the first gen experience? We have the imposter syndrome, correct? We
Yeah.
had the fact that they didn't have the role models they needed in order to aspire, because, people learn through emulation by watching others. And if we don't have any of our mentors or so forth. So go ahead and just summarize a few things that you learned from the film, so we can move into this new era that you're into with radical cultural acceptance and stuff.
Yeah. So when someone watches the film, I mean, there's so much to say about the shared experience of what it's like to be first gen Latino in the United States. And the biggest thing I learned was how, the whole premise of the film is you're not alone. The purpose of the film is to make sure people knew that they were not alone. And the person that got the biggest gift of really knowing I am not alone was me, because I was the one sitting in the chair realizing this exponentially. Wow, everybody pretty much feels the exact same way I do. And so if, when people watch it, if they are Latino, if they're, there's so many people that have fallen in love with us, right? That are our besties, our neighbors, our coworkers, people that get a chance to interact with us, they will understand us better. We will understand ourselves better. If you're Latino, you don't have to be first gen. As a matter of fact, if you're an immigrant and you have children, you'll actually understand your children better. And many people have thanked me for helping them understand how their children feel. And
Mm.
so you'll just see a lot of common threads. I would say one of the biggest common threads, and a point and a place where we really still need to do so much work as a community, is around language and the shame and the
Oh, I
perpetuation.
love that piece of it. Go ahead, because that
Yeah.
is so important.
Right. And really just the perpetuation of shame, and the evaluation and the using of language as a barometer for Latinidad. I mean, and I'm so proud of the No Sabo kids now, and that whole movement of really just being able to own, like, I don't speak the language, right? And whether or not someone agrees with it or not, that is all, we all get to have our own opinions. Where I step into the conversation is, you do not have permission to shame anybody for not knowing that this we must stop. We must stop shaming our own community, right? Because then that chops us off at the knees. We must stop doing that as a community. It's not helping anybody. Trust me, I've hugged many people, men, women, old, young, in tears, that maintain a sense of shame and embarrassment. And the thing is, this does not get siloed. They don't just put it away and not think about it. It literally lives and breathes all throughout their entire life, and they don't feel good enough. And so it always bubbles into reasons why I'm not good enough. And that was actually the reason why,
Well, yeah, I do say that children internalize.
yes,
And so they think there's something wrong with me rather than saying, wait a minute, what's going on in the culture that won't allow me to speak two languages when it's a great gift to be bilingual? I mean,
right. And
because you don't know that as a child. You just know that you have to conform and that if you're going to succeed, you better know English. That's what you know.
right. I mean, it's so unquestioned. And
Right.
it just, there's so much to say about it. Giving grace is a really big personal theme, and it's a big professional theme for me. And giving ourselves grace wherever we are and wherever we think we're not, but then also giving the community that grace, because we still have the mountain to climb, and we're so much better off climbing it together instead of trying to yank each other down and criticizing silly differences, and evaluating someone's Latinidad has got to be one of the hardest things to endure. And that is probably the biggest pain of being first gen, is around language, because there are no fully bilingual first gen people that I have ever met that ever believe their Spanish is good enough,
Mm.
ever. And this is what people need to know. The grappling with the not good enough persists. And so any part that detracts from in any way, shape, or form that we exist, or that we challenge, or that anything about us that criticizes our own community around language, or honestly anything else, we must stop it immediately. We just can't afford it as a community. We don't have that to spare, because kids in middle school are crying just as much as executives are crying. We just can't afford that anymore.
Right. Well, I would like to say a couple things here that might be helpful to folks. First of all, I love your idea of gratitude, because gratitude and generosity, mi casa su casa, gratitude, gracias a Dios, is one of our main values as Latinos.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that gives they've done studies on Latinos. We're the most optimistic people in America. Why? Because we think things are going to get better. Why? Because when you say thank you, your glass is half full, not half empty.
Yeah.
And so I was taught that as a child, to be grateful, and I think that's such an important thing. Spanish is interesting. Now, I lost my language, and I met my grandmother when I was like 13, and I realized that I had lost part of my soul. And so I actually went in the Peace Corps and spent 2 years in Chile and relearned. But I have to tell you, when I make a presentation, I have a picture of me and it says, ¿Por qué hablo pocha? Why do I speak pocha? Which to a Mexican is you don't speak it correctly. And
Right.
what I want people to know, and this is so important to our young people, it wasn't our fault.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we feel bad because when you get disconnected from your ancestry, that is painful. I wish Americans would understand that when they came to this country and had to let go of their ancestors, that was a painful thing, to become American. And you don't have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
We have the capacity to be more and more and more. That's why I love young people's intersectionality idea.
Yes.
So, just speaking some of the language is enough, really, because you're honoring your ancestors, you're honoring the language. And if you make a commitment little by little, you'll learn more. But it doesn't matter whether you're bilingual. And I love the fact that, now we're 33% immigrants still. And immigrants bring that sense of revitalization to the language, to the culture. So we're not becoming more American, we're becoming more Latino.
I love that. I love that. And then, I mean, literally, hence the reason why the study of first gen, and of course I'll die on this hill, is so critical, because we can hearken back and say, you know what, the first gen really knows that like it's yesterday. We know the sharpness of those feelings. And many people, like my husband, for example, he's Scottish and Irish. His family has been here for so long, he's not sure if he's Scottish or Irish, or what percentage of either one, right? And so there's such a distance to that pain. And when we can't identify, like when we can't say, wow, I get that pain because I live that pain, right? My husband has had to meet me in conversations and understanding from a different place other than empathy, because he just doesn't know. His parents never talked about it. He never heard his grandparents talking.
Right.
And so really understanding that, having a sensitivity to that, what do you hold on to and what do you let go of? And then what is left and what's left up to me to kind of create. And the other thing I wanted to share too, and sometimes people hear this like I'm against learning Spanish. This is not the case at all. And I want to always acknowledge the people that are feeling the most powerless in this conversation are the ones that didn't get to be bilingual. So I always want to acknowledge
Right.
that feeling, and remember that there are different languages that we speak that you alluded to, which is, bilingual is also being able to navigate both worlds, like navigate the dominant culture spaces in education, in professional environments. I mean, the ability that we have to detect nuance in people's expressions and some of the things that they say. We're
Well,
really
Denise, you talk in one of, I think it was your TED Talk. She did a TED Talk, folks. So look that up. You talk about the collective culture versus the individualistic culture. And I think that's a real important thing because we are collective. And we do care about family, community, relationships. And yet the dominant culture is an I culture. It's an individualistic culture. And we've had to learn to navigate things like that. When you're talking
yes.
about being bilingual, bicultural, you're really navigating two worlds like you talk about.
Yeah, and that I would say if there's one area that where the most power lives in my work, especially my work in belonging, because there are other, people speak about belonging in a certain way, the way I speak about belonging. And one of the biggest differentiators of what I talk about is really addressing collectivism and self-reliance. And what does it look like in education? And what does it look like in professional environments? And so many Latinas specifically, and we're talking now, just a few weeks after that Lean In report came out, talking about how many are documenting how few Latinas are in the C-suite, and we'll never make it. We're just like non-existent. We just don't ever make it. I say it's because of, well, we all know and understand the institutional reasons, but what's our part? And our part is really understanding how to navigate and understand, okay, my strengths, because I believe collectivism is the ultimate strength.
Right.
And we believe, and so we strip ourselves of this collectivism in favor of self-reliance, of course, for survival, because that's how all of the institutions are built. They're built with a self-reliant lens. Now, if we bring more of our collective ideas, like considering the group, trying to bring all of us, there's just so much involved in considering the group versus considering the individual in education. And like I said, in corporate America, it really is a winning value system if we stop disregarding it, right? But we first have to understand it. We first have to understand our choices. Like, why don't I take credit for my work? Why do I always answer questions without just saying thank you, right? Why do I have to spread the credit across with people maybe that didn't contribute to the project?
Right.
Because so many Latinas are raised, "Galleta te ves más bonita." We all know that expression, right? We all know, don't make waves, don't stand out. Your work will speak for itself. That is the worst choice that we can make. But it's like such a violation of who we are, that telling a Latina, no, you just have to ask for a raise. We just don't have that muscle developed, right? And so on the one hand, I believe we need to develop the muscle. On the other hand, I believe that we have to stop discounting what we bring to the table, which are those collective values.
Well, it's not only that, Denise, and my work is around the fact that we are moving towards a collective society. And if we don't move towards that, we're not going to survive, right? And that all indigenous communities, all cultures really, except for the Western individualistic culture, are collaborative. Human beings did not make it here on their own. They made it here because we had tribes, we had communities, we had families, we worked together. This has been a collective journey, an evolution of a species.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
so
it is, that's the
really,
and
let's not get this out on the internet. It's an aberration to think about me before we, because you are only me. I am only myself because of other people.
Yeah. Hmm.
So that sense of we, and you know, when I teach women leadership, a lot of time Latinas are embarrassed to stand up, and I say, just a minute, you're standing up for your ancestors. You're standing up for all the people that brought you here. We
Hmm.
did not get here alone. The sacrifices that people made. You are standing up for other Latinas. You are
Hmm.
standing up to represent them. You know, we have to get that sense of collective power as well.
Yeah,
Because
that's
look
a
at
great
what you're
reminder.
doing to
Hmm.
change the narrative about who Latinas are. And
Hmm.
you would never have been able to do that if you would have said, being there calladita, oh, I want to make a film, but I didn't do it.
Right.
Luckily for us, we've learned how to maneuver and make things happen in the dominant culture. And now you're gonna, you know, you're gonna have your book come out, you have your movie, you've been touching all these lives. So before we wrap up, I have to know about this radical self-awareness, and also kind of talk a little bit about how this sense of belonging, this sense of community is something that everybody wants in their heart. You know,
Yes, I love
it's
it.
coming out because as marginalized people, as minorities, you know, we couldn't feel that, or we didn't have that, but we want to belong just like everyone else. We want to be acknowledged.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, so the idea of radical cultural self-awareness came to me, and I shared it in my TEDx talk that I did a while back, and it really still stands on the same conversation that we had, like really without understanding where's my dominance, am I collective dominant? Am I self-reliant dominant? How do the expressions of my life, like where would I categorize them? And the reason why that's important is because it shows where I can grow and where I can utilize the tools of collectivism to be successful in self-reliance, or I can understand why I'm not as successful in a self-reliant only or dominant area. It's because they're simply not collective dominant enough or collective enough. And what that has to do with belonging is, let's say in a professional setting, I have always been a round peg in a square hole. And a lot of it is because of collective self-reliant and just not understanding that it wasn't a value match more than anything else. Okay. And so when we think about and consider the places that we want to work and contribute our gifts to, right? Like if we're working for someone, or even if we want to be an entrepreneur, how do we want to exist? Where where are we going to fit in? Well, when we're examining a company culture, if you're Latina, it's super important, especially the closer you are to the immigrant, this is going to be even more important to you. And so the most important piece of that, and especially as it pertains to the idea of radical cultural self-awareness, is we must, in my opinion, we must understand where our value dominance is. Are we more collective dominant, or are we more self-reliant dominant? And so in my case, when it comes to parenting my daughters, I'm super collective dominant. I was the one that brought my kids everywhere. We did not do babysitters. We just brought them everywhere because that's how I grew up, like sleeping on the coats.
Right,
And
right.
you know what I mean? Like
The
that.
kids go to sleep and the party goes on.
Yeah, and there was no place where I wasn't allowed, which I loved. Everyone was, all generations
Yeah.
welcome, right?
Well, that's
And
how we
so,
become relationship oriented.
yes,
I
and
mean, we're not putting the corner with a babysitter. I was right here in my father's arms, you know?
yes, I mean, and that's to me, and what's interesting, I'm inclined to say that's the right way to do it, right? Because
That's how human beings made it.
and there you
We were
go.
right there
And
in the
that's
tribe, everybody together.
right. And so that's my value system, which is the judgment of the right and wrongness of it. And that's just true, I believe. And that's how I raised my kids. And my husband, thank God, was for it. And interestingly enough, he grew up in Oklahoma, and they had a very similar value system. And so everyone was sort of a part of everything. And so this we share sometimes there's learning and sometimes there's things that we have in common. This we have in common. And so when we think about professional, me making a movie and traveling all over the country for the last 8 years.
Yeah, I love the little slides of you with your suitcase walking around.
Oh
I said,
my
I wish I
God.
would have taken pictures of myself, because that's what you have to do after
Yeah.
you write, or you have to promote it, or after you have your
Yeah.
movie.
And really, I just was invited everywhere. And so that is very self-reliant dominant. And it's funny because my mother used to call me all the time and ask me who is staying with the kids. And she knows and knew that and I am still married. but my mom used to ask me every time. And because it's her value system that I should have stayed home. And
Right.
in the audiences that I used to speak to, the beginning audiences, I would say for the first several years were mostly Latino audiences. There was always a hand that was raised that asked me, what did my husband think? Or what did my parents think? What did my family think? Because they all knew the same thing that I knew, which is I was kind of pushing, like, culturally, I was pushing the culture aside to share a movie about my culture and to show
Yeah.
up, right? It was very like, it was very kind of like, how does this work? Because this is kind of a betrayal to the culture, but it's also deeply forwarding for the culture to share this film and to show up in person and to kind of exist that way for so long. Now, I've done hundreds upon hundreds of these, and I
Right.
still get the question. And so that's collective dominance. So in my parenting, I'm deeply collective. Professionally, I'm deeply self-reliant. I
Yeah.
can play the game, but I also now get to choose who I work with. And I only want to work with this idea. It's called a high quality human. And Juana, I would put you in this category. And it's really
Thanks.
the gift.
I don't feel that way a lot of times, but
Oh,
thanks.
girl. Yes. I mean, I totally see you and the work that you've done in our community and all over the world with your work. I mean, you have high quality human written all over you. And
Well,
to me,
this, again, I tell people this is my job. I don't really have a choice.
I love it. And
Indigenous people believe that if you don't follow your mission, your purpose, your intuition, you'll never find your power.
I love that. That
You know
feels
what I mean?
like a
I mean,
sacred
it is
space. Yeah.
hard, but that is where your power lies in integrating who you are and what you, in a sense, came here to do and what you can contribute.
Yeah, I would say
I
understanding
did
the
want to
power.
say something that I think is so important for folks. Um, it's not a dichotomy, the I and the we, or the self-reliant
No,
and the collective.
no.
And so it's like a basket. And for that basket to be strong, and in some indigenous communities, it can hold water, it's so strong. Each strand has to be strong,
Mhm.
but it has to be strong in the collective.
Yeah.
You understand what I mean? So when you're out helping your culture, and I have to say this, I have 3 daughters and I'm so proud of them. Because I was like you, I had been called to build organizations for Latinos when there weren't any in the, starting in the late 70s and then going through. They have benefited in an interesting way. They all have advanced degrees. My youngest daughter just is going to be an art professor at the University of Austin. I mean,
Oh, wow.
they're very, and if you talk to them, they'd say, "Oh, mom wasn't home enough." We ate a lot of
Oh,
quesadillas,
uh-huh.
but it's kind of like both. At this point in human evolution, women have to have both.
Yeah.
We have to be collective. We have to, embrace our culture. But again, you stepped out of it in order to expand the basket in a sense. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Expand who we are. And your children and all of us will benefit from that.
Yeah, thank you. And also too, going back to that conversation about really um having the awareness to understand what collective and expression of collectivism is in our own lives and what an expression of self-reliance, because definitely self-reliance is not bad. A lot of people will say, oh, self-reliant, selfish. No, no, it's not. It literally is just like a code of living, right? Just like collectivism is a code of living. We don't benefit by judging it. We really benefit by doing this. It's funny that you said it's like a
I
basket to me,
love that.
like
Yeah,
this.
that's how it is.
And then, so
Exactly.
this is what the relationship is to belonging. This is what it means to belong, to say this is good enough and so is this. But it's really only when we do this that we find our strength and that we can reconcile, like, these, when people say the both sides of me and like this kind of inner turmoil, right? This is what the aspiration is, like
Right.
complete acceptance and the granting of grace to self and others.
Mhm.
And so to me, belonging is my highest calling, and sharing what I learned from our community and what I learned from living my life and documenting, with this film, with my podcast, and now with my book, and then and using that as like an offering to the world, because the world wants to talk about belonging. What a shocker, right? In the time that we find
Oh,
ourselves
no,
right.
no, the alienation and the loneliness that people have. And now that we're a technological society where, like I said, I never knew my premier relationship would be with the machine. my
Mm.
computer.
Uh,
So, today we really have to rebuild a sense of community, and that community has to be totally and completely inclusive.
yes.
And
Yeah.
we have to go there with our pain, with our wounds, and everything. And
Right.
we
And
have to
so,
heal each other.
yeah. And when you said, I loved what you said about, finding our power, like in our purpose, and really that's the way through, but also that it's hard. That's, to me, a missing piece, is to talk about how hard that is. Because I think sometimes, and especially, in the quick before and after world we're in right now, we kind of discount the hard, or the becoming, or the how much grace I had to grant myself, because how many days I felt not good enough, even with all of the accomplishments and the things happening. I wake up and feel just as not good enough as the next person, right? And it's almost to the extent that I aspire to achieve, it's to the extent that I experience my own not good enough. And really the unwillingness that we have as humans to not express that, will be our demise, And so, and I'm not saying I want to, share, like overshare. This isn't what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about honest sharing, authentic sharing. And to me, that's what pulls community in, when I see myself in you and when you see yourself in me. And when we see people that look different or come from a different place, and when they see themselves in us, this is what becomes possible. But it has to come from, let me tell you what's been the hardest part of my journey, that I still grapple with it to this day, that I signed a deal with Simon & Schuster and I still experience imposter syndrome, but at least I know that this part of me I don't want to cut off. It's like I wouldn't want to cut off my arm like that guy that got stuck in Utah, hiking. I would never want
Let's
to do
cut that out.
yeah, like I
No,
can't cut
I
that out.
just think that your message I'm just so happy because, your purpose is organic and it grows. And the more you say yes and the more you work at it, the bigger scope and impact you'll have. And I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, for all of us, for taking this journey. It hasn't been easy. I still do smile when I see you getting with those suitcases, and all your videos of you going to all these different places, and how much you've given in order to get to this place. And what I see now is a universality. And I think Latinos, because we are so diverse and we are so bienvenido and accepting of differences, because we are all so different, I think we're the ones who can lead our society to this new sense of inclusiveness and belonging.
Same, same. And just one more thing about my book. The subtitle is about shedding secrets. It's not about sharing
Oh,
secrets.
shedding. I said
Shedding.
sharing.
Yeah. And so, and I just want to clear that up, only because I want people to know that the number one question I get publicly. So when I'm done speaking, there's always somebody that says, how do I get rid of my imposter syndrome? Or what do you think of it? Or whatever, something about imposter syndrome. And the number one thing that happens in private is that people share their secrets with me. And this has been happening hundreds of times since 2016, since the film came out. And I thought, oh, people see the film and then they want to share their secrets. I don't know why, but this happens. And then I stopped going to screenings and people started just hiring me to speak, and it still happened. And now it happens pretty much anywhere I go. People share their
You're
secrets with
like a magnet.
yeah, I'm a magnet for people's secrets. And I didn't know why. And I didn't know what I had done to kind of earn their trust. I just kind of reconciled, okay, I guess I'm the secret keeper, right? And the thing is that a lot of times, and the premise of the book is really to look at the things that we hold secret, especially Latinas, and look at how those secrets bind us into lives where we feel like we don't
Yes.
belong. Because really, where we're meant to be is living lives living lives like the one that I dreamt up for myself at the bar that night. Filmmaker, healer of a generation, someone whose life is of consequence in
I
that
love
matter.
that. The healer
Yeah.
of a generation.
Yeah.
And I say step into that power.
Yes.
That we have to step into our power. We can do great things.
And
And,
sometimes we have
I
to,
do have to say this because I come from such a humble background. My sister started off as a seamstress and ended up designing clothes and doing great things like
oh,
that.
wow.
And I also used to, he passed on, so I won't say anything about this. I once had a Hispanic hairdresser who was voted the best hairdresser in the Southwest. It
Oh,
doesn't matter. Every calling is important. You know, the
yeah.
person who has this ability to do computer stuff, I just am in awe. So we all have our gifts. We all have something to share. But what I love about what you're doing is dream big.
Mhm.
You know, that's part of the title of your book. You know,
And then,
how do we dream big and
yeah,
not
and then
limit ourselves?
a lot of it is the things that we believe we can share with nobody are the things that will set us free.
Love that. All right, folks, you've had a chance to listen to the incredible Denise. Your homework is to listen to some of this and start. How am I going to listen to my intuition? What were some opportunities that came, or how am I going to be aware when opportunities come? What is my purpose? How can I dream big? What can I step into? How can I balance my collectivism with to be an individual that stands up for themselves? What a wonderful conversation. We wish you so much grace and so much beauty in your path. We're looking forward to this book, and let us know how we can promote it when it comes out. And let's keep wearing our turquoise.
I love it. I love it. And if someone wants to join if they want to watch my film, they can go to my website, denisesolarcox.com. If they want to follow me on my book writing journey, because that's another thing. So many Latinas want to write a book.
Yes, yes.
And so I am being very candid on my journey and basically writing to this group now of a few hundred women that are on this journey with me over the next year and a half as my book
Well,
comes.
that's going to grow.
So
That is going to
yes,
grow.
yes.
We need more Latinas making movies, writing books,
Oh my
healing
gosh,
people.
yes.
And I love this healing a generation, because we
Yeah.
really do need to uplift our young generation, because they're the ones who are going to actualize El futuro es latino.
Yes, I love that. I love that.
Ok, muchas bendiciones. Te quiero. Gracias.
Thank you.